So we've got our fresh tea on this rather warm day. As you can see, I've rolled up my sleeves and everything. It's quite warm. And so, yes, I wanted us to carry on with the question that we were talking about. We've looked at the social and that aspect of things. And then the rest of it came down to the educator. The educator perhaps not being as skilled as needed to teach a particular subject. I'll read it again. It says, more often than not, the homeschooling educator may be good in one area or subject but weak in another, which could severely limit the potential of the child. An example would be that the educator is great at science but weak in languages, could prove limiting if your child has a fantastic skill set toward languages. In a normal school environment, you have the opportunity to expose your child to a diverse pool of educators, each working in their field of expertise. So through dealing with families in Oikos, and then again in your personal experience, have you found that where you have a limited knowledge or skill set in a particular area, it has hampered the children, or how has that been dealt with?
Well, Mark, I think I should again answer this question on a personal level, because I know that is my own testimony and that is my experience. So we do have very, very many examples of literally thousands of families now that would be able to respond, that are actually home educators, and they would respond to that. And I believe they would respond to it in a very similar fashion to what my own experience has been. And that is, all of us acknowledge and know that we don't have all the skills required to teach our children. As that question or statement, I'm not sure if that's actually a question, but I think the reference to that is that an individual, a parent standing alone, isn't actually going to be able to have all the skills required to teach their child in all the areas. And obviously, that is an obvious statement, because who does? There's not one individual that has every skill required.
True.
And what the reference there is, well, a school is going to offer all the other needs, perhaps. But my question is, there's family that offer, you've got a variety of people within a family, in the extended family, the community, the church community, the world out there, and Uncle Google, as we call Google.
Yes.
There's just, the sky's the limit, isn't it? So if I don't have a particular skill that my child is showing an interest in, and I go, well, I don't know anything about computers and technology, because quite frankly, there wasn't a computer in our schools in the time that I was in school. Then when I was at home, there were no computers at home. My entire childhood, I grew up without a computer or a television set, right until when I left home. So I wasn't equipped either through the education system or being home educated in computer skills. And now computer skills are just about vital for everybody. In fact, even artisans that are in careers that are very practical and mechanical, I'm presuming that they have a computer where they can run their accounts or their invoicing or their whatever from, or even just their monthly budget. So even if they don't have a computer, they've got a smartphone that does that. Now, yes. How do you know how to use a smartphone? As an adult, I've had to learn those things. And I'm sure a lot of adults in my age bracket will testify that they have to get their children to teach them. And that's a danger. Actually, that's something we should talk about, so that the child doesn't feel that they're an authority over the parent. So that's an area of concern. But back to this particular question, my own experience is, when our son was about 14, he started showing an interest in computer coding and being interested in computers. And I didn't have those skills. We didn't even have stable internet to be able to provide us with being able to hop onto Google and get the required knowledge that we needed. But parents can do that now. And in fact, even children in school are using the internet and the World Wide Web to educate themselves in areas of interest that perhaps the school isn't providing, because maybe their school doesn't have a technical department that is adequately meeting their needs. So I'm not sure that we can say that the school's variety of options is actually giving the child more. I'm not sure that we can just blanketly say that, as a blanket statement, because quite frankly, I actually don't know what the schools are providing, because our life isn't in the school system. So I wouldn't be the right person to comment on the schools are offering A, B, and C, and X, Y, and Z, because I actually don't know. What I have heard is the concern about the regression in education and the crisis in education. That's what I hear about. So, and that when they're talking education there, they're referencing to school system education. And so that's why home educators feel at a tremendous advantage, because they're doing one-on-one tuition, they've got their extended family members to that have a pool of resources as far as skills is concerned. Uncle might have, one uncle might be an accountant and an aunt might be a graphic designer. I use graphic designer because our daughter is a graphic designer, but she didn't go to college and I didn't teach her to be a graphic designer. It's self-taught. She went onto Google and we got Photoshop. So as a parent, I could invest in her interest by getting the software required for her to train herself in a particular field. So, now I'm also thinking of something, because as you can hear, there's a lot that I could say on this topic, but I've just thought of something now that I remember my mother getting a little bit put out about something, that when I was in the primary level of school, because when I got to the high level, she pulled me out of school and continued to home educate me. But when I was in primary school, they were doing fundraisers for a swimming pool for the school. And we were doing cake sales and fairs, and everybody was like raising funds. And then I left that school, and the swimming pool hadn't been built yet. And so my mother used to talk about all the effort we put into fundraising for the swimming pool for the next lot of children that were coming through. So that was great. They got the swimming pool and they got the benefit of that. But I'm thinking of that at this moment, because I'm thinking about how much we've invested in our own children and used those resources of raising the funds and budgeting carefully and everything else, so that when our son was 18, we could get him the computer that he required to have the specs that it needed to have, so that he could continue in his interest of videography. And now that same computer is what is being used now in post-production, editing, suite, and everything else to make these videos for Oikos and to hopefully help people. So that investment went much further, as you see, than an individual person. But all the training that he's had to be a videographer, I don't have those skills. I don't profess to have those skills. So he went online and he did a course on audio training and audio engineering, or whatever it is, and videography, and all the different courses that he could do online. And he actually then harnessed the skills of people all over the world. not to mention what's contained in a school system. He was able to access skills from people all over the world. And just this morning, him and I were watching a video on how to improve our videography skills for doing a good production so that we can bless people. And we were watching that online through, I think it was from New York. And we were watching this. One guy was in New York and the other guy was in Seattle. And they were on the screen talking to each other about sharing their skills. And there's an example that happened right this morning, that I don't have the skill set, as they call it, to train my son. But it's available to us and we can learn together. It's another exciting thing about home education, is the parents are alongside their children learning, whatever it is at the same time. They're growing and learning together. So I don't know if that that's my personal response. I mean, I can go on and on, because our daughter, in her graphic work, she was designing the covers for the books that we now publish in Oikos. And all those skills, I know I didn't teach her, but I never felt inadequate, because I have to, before we move on to the next thing, I have to say that the reason why I never felt inadequate was because my job has never been to train them in knowledge or in skills that they might need for their adult life when it comes to work-based things. My job was to train our daughter to be able to be capable in the home and be a good wife and mother and homemaker. And that's what I was trained by my mother, was primary, and that she needed to have a relationship with the Lord. She needed to be saved. I needed to share our faith with her. Then she needed to make it her own if she chose to, and so on. That was my job. So to me, my primary job all the time with our children was actually training them in the Word, and I had that. but I didn't have all what was required to expound on that and explain. But then, fortunately, I had his help. So we could read the word and then we could discuss it together. And I could trust that God was going to impart to them what he needed to impart to them when they needed that for their personal walk. So that was my primary goal all the time, and it still is. And so the knowledge part of it is, to me, irrelevant. I don't mean to chuck it out, but you know what I mean when I say irrelevant.
So I would think perhaps there would be areas, I mean, we know, for example, like basic mathematics, like addition, subtraction at least, simple multiplication, being able to read, those sort of things are kind of needed in everyday life. So obviously those are things that you will push through. But perhaps, like you say, once you know what your child is interested in, you can focus on subjects and things that would build that up in them, as opposed to giving them this platter that has everything, and now they only get to spend maybe 2 hours a day on what they like, and they have to go through perhaps a chemistry lesson for a couple of months, and they really couldn't care less about chemistry, and they're never going to use that again. So I think from what you're saying, it's more a case of, yes, there are certain skills that are going to be taught regardless, but then there are those that you could say, well, look, this is this. We can look at it, we can show you. You're not interested, you want to go down here, let's invest more time on where you see yourself going. So you still give them the opportunity, but then you almost curtail the curriculum to their interests.
I would say that is how it goes with regard to tailoring it to the young adult. And I'm saying young adult in this instance because I don't think that applies when they're little, because I think that's dangerous. I think there's a little bit too much flexibility, which actually makes a child insecure. That's what I'm witnessing in families and home educating families, that because of the freedom and the liberty to be able to start your day and not rush out the door, and we spoke about that previously. Yes. Because of that, parents can be a little bit inclined to be a little bit too loose and not actually bring the foundation of literacy and mathematics in place. So it could be that a little child of saying, but I don't want to read today, mommy, and well, that's not actually an option, because it's my responsibility to teach you to read, because you need to be able to be literate. And so then it becomes more a gentle guiding and loving instruction than the tendency to say, well, okay, darling, don't worry, you don't need to read today because I know you don't like reading. Do you see what I'm saying? But now when they're 15 and you've taught them to read, and now they're interested in, the one is interested in computer technology, coding, programming, whatever, and the other one's interested in graphic arts. Those are two different things. Now, you're not going to put in the syllabus or the subjects. You mentioned subjects early on, because for us, we didn't have subject. That's not how it works in the Oikos lifestyle. We fortunately don't have to put everything into boxes. We sort of jump out the box. Yeah. But so I'm not going to take our daughter and say to her, well, part of the syllabus is you have to do programming and you have to do coding, because her skills and her interest and everything lies in design. So yes, I would invest in the design aspect for her and the technology and coding side of software, whatever, for the child that's interested in that. So I'm just saying that we need to be a bit careful with being too go with the bent of the child from when they're really little, because then the child is the one that starts becoming the authority in the home, which becomes a problem. It's not according to God's order.
Okay.
The other thing, Mark, is that we had a maths tutor in our home. His name was Steve Demi. We had him digitally, where we put his DVD into the DVD player and he gave us the lessons. And you know what a relief that was to me, because you talked about the skills of the parents. Mm-hmm. Well, maths and science was definitely my weak points. And so I had Steve Demi teaching me while he was teaching our children at the same time. And I used to say, oh, thank you, Steve, you know, the light bulb moments, one after the other with him. So I never had anxiety about teaching my children maths, because Steve Demi wrote a maths curriculum thinking about the parent that is going to feel afraid about teaching their child maths at home. And so he helps us, the parent, to teach our child. The same thing happened with science, because Dr. J. Weil speaks to the student in the book. For example, we're going to begin an exciting journey of understanding what is science and our creator, and his whole text is written in a way that speaks directly to the student. And there's an audiobook, so if a child's struggling with reading, they can listen to the book being read aloud to them. And I can listen to the book being read aloud to them. And myself as a parent, I can take the teacher manual or the parent manual, and I can read the questions at the end of the module and say to my child, so what's the difference between the various different spheres, atmosphere, hydrosphere, whatever they are? I don't even remember them anymore. Does it matter to me right now? No, because it's not my field of needing to know. Okay, but I had the answer in the parent book. So I could ask him the question and I had the answer. He didn't have the answer. He had done the module which had that content in it, that knowledge. And so we would then sit and chat about it. And I would have the help of the parent manual. That's another thing that I think there might be a misunderstanding out there of people not realizing that there's a lot of parent help. Whereas in a school system, it's the teacher teaching to the children, and the parents at home don't have the curriculum that the teacher's using.
That's something that I was also wondering about. I just want to make 100% certain that in the curriculum that Oikos provides there's no compromise on the integrity or the level of the material in order to bring it down to a point where a parent who perhaps is not scientifically minded is still able to engage with the child. It's at a point where the child could possibly go beyond what the parent can understand, but you're still able to interact with them and stimulate their interest in that subject or in that part of it.
Completely correct. I mean, look at videography. We've been talking about that. I don't have the skills and the knowledge that our son has regarding videography, but does it matter necessarily? What matters is my support of him. What matters is, am I there to be interested with him and encourage him in his field of interest? That's what matters, not how much knowledge I have about the topic. But I like the point you make about there's no compromise on the actual quality of the material, because I found the opposite, the exact opposite to be that there's an opportunity to really expand the material. So it's not stripped down at all. It's in actual fact, there's more added. And that's what home educating parents are finding, that they're learning along the way. And it's really an exciting journey, because you're not just sitting teaching your child, go, oh, but wasn't really good at maths, how am I going to do this? Because there you've got Steve Demi helping you along. And he's not stripping it down or watering it down for the sake of making it simple so the parent can teach it. Not at all. He's a mathematician and he is teaching it at the level that is required, so that what happens is the students go into university that have done his maths program. It's called Maths UC. They go into university and the professors are going, who taught you maths? How come you've got this understanding and this knowledge? It's not just about knowledge. You see, we must remember another benefit of being able to teach your own children is you don't just give them knowledge. You wait until they've got understanding, and then you get them to get mastery, and then you move on. Because as a parent, you don't pull out the next book to read when you know they're struggling on this one. You as a parent can't do that to your child. You love your child. You don't want to make it difficult for them or make them hate something. Well, let's hope. I'm always hoping that parents are being the parents God would like them to be, and if they're not, then I hope that they get some help from him to be that parent. But that's what I'm saying, is that a loving parent is not going to force feed their child knowledge, pump the knowledge and practice to write the test and know that their child hasn't understood anything, or their child doesn't have mastery, or doesn't even have that skill. It was just a whole lot of knowledge put in to prepare to write a test, and now the knowledge is gone. That is what parents have experienced through other systems. But when you can home educate, I don't see that happening a lot unless a parent isn't involved and they're just giving the child the material and saying, finish the book so that you can get the next book. And have you finished that book? Okay, good, here's the next book. That's not parent involvement. That is a parent just feeding their child the knowledge, and making it possible for them to get that knowledge. There's a lot more to it than that.
On that, I want to bring that back to something you mentioned earlier in regards to using Google and the internet to help where perhaps the parent's skill set or knowledge is lacking, is how much monitoring is actually done of the student using the internet, because we know that there's a lot out there that perhaps as a parent you don't want your children to see, or they might stumble into something that is going to not only detract from their schooling, but is completely contrary to the Word of God. And now you almost have to kind of go into crisis control mode and put the education aside and try sort out this issue. I mean, I don't need to mention what's out there. I think every parent knows the type of things that they don't want their children seeing. So how closely is that monitored, or is it a thing of, oh, because I'm not invested as a parent, whatever they discover is up to them? Where basically, how is that controlled?
That's another big one, because this is now another topic all on its own. How is it controlled is up to the parent and up to all the blocks you can put on. And maybe I should just answer it from a personal testimony point of view again. And that is, there were certain age limits, as in you're not going to let your child who's 7 watch an 18 rated movie. So we just put the same age limits, restrictions on the use of the internet. And it had to be monitored. That is the part of the parent's responsibility. You don't leave your child in open access to the internet on a computer when he's 14 years old, where he can be exposed to all sorts of things that you mention, that we won't mention, and now the parent has the crisis management. Well, to avoid that crisis management, don't open that door in the first place. So as far as how's it controlled, to me, is you don't open the door. And however, little children have got smartphones, and now they are open to access to the internet, and there they can discover things or even stumble upon things accidentally. So how is that managed and monitored? There are so many discussions on this topic out there, even on the internet. There are studies that have been done, the damages that are resulting as consequence to this topic that we're talking about. So personally, we were just very, very specific about it. We were very intentional. There were no phones allowed because it wasn't necessary, because you're not leaving your child at school and needing to get in touch with them to find out when to pick them up and all the rest. And the days that when we didn't even have those, the parents made away without phones. So now the story is they have to have a phone so that the parent can keep in touch and all that. But then you're opening a door possibly, unless your child has got a phone with parent has put all the restrictions and the blocks, and they aren't able to access and be exposed to things that are going to possibly be harmful to them. So I don't actually know how to go about suggesting. Your question was, how do you control that? How do you block that? I'm not going to presume that I can give advice in that at all, because of the fact that technology is going at such a rate that whatever we say today might change next week anyway. So I think it comes down to, it's the parent's responsibility, and they need to decide, what do I want to expose my child exposed to, and how much am I going to be involved in that control? And that they might get resistance from their child. That's one of the biggest issues, because now they're going to get resistance. The child's going, but my friend and my cousin and this one's allowed and why am I not allowed? And that's when I talk to parents about saying, why don't you have a family meeting and say to your children that you are convicted from God's word that you need to raise them in the way they should go, so that they will not depart from it, if that's a parent's conviction. And that way is this way over here. And if we let you go that way, this is what it's going to look like. And it's all there in Proverbs. It says, if you go this way, you're going to be, the thieves are going to get you, you're going to be caught in the snare. We don't want that to happen to you. We love you. We want to protect you. That's what God has asked us to do. And this is how we're going to protect you. So rather than, no, you can't have it because I said so, is rather discuss it with them and say, this is why, because we love you. Now, to me, I think that's been an example of them showing God's love for them is coming through them and to the child. And now the child is experiencing security and love and protection. which is great, because isn't that what part of the parent's function is? So you can actually take this technology monster that it can be and the destruction that it can be, and it can actually work for you. You can use it in ways like we are today, whereby we can share our discussion with people anywhere in the world, or you can let it be something that can be harmful. It can work either way, for or against. It's up to the parent. It's their responsibility to take care of their children, and to protect them and to love them. And they should do it at the very best, in the very best way that they possibly can. And if they're struggling to do that, they should get help to do that, to be the parents that God needs them to be.
Okay, fantastic. I think we actually have a lot to take away from today, to think about, and I suppose it really comes down to each situation. Each home situation is going to be unique. Every child is unique. And so there's no blanket answer to anything, really.
Definitely not.
But again, Sonia, thank you so much for your time and letting me come and visit and bring these questions.
Do you know what? We didn't have tea. So should we have tea now then? And you're welcome to come back and ask questions again if you have more questions.
Indeed,
I'm
I
happy to
will
answer what I can.
Fantastic. Sonia, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And thank you
again.
out there for watching and for being with us. And we hope that this has been in some way helpful to you. If you've got questions that you'd like to ask, you can send us an email to help@oikosfamily.co.za. In the meantime, be blessed. Thank you for watching. Bye.